Ophelia Redmond stood in the general store of Custer, Montana Territory, her head nearly brushing the ceiling beams, and watched the storekeeper's face turn crimson as he stammered something about not having dresses in her size. It was August 1883, and she had heard variations of this conversation more times than she could count. At 6 feet and 3 inches tall, Ophelia towered over nearly every man and woman in the small mining town nestled in the rugged Montana wilderness. She had arrived only 2 weeks prior, accompanying her elderly Aunt Martha, who had inherited a small boarding house from a distant cousin. The journey from Ohio had been arduous, filled with stares and whispers, but Ophelia had hoped that perhaps in the wild territories, people might be less concerned with propriety and appearance. She had been wrong. "I can order something special, Miss Redmond," the storekeeper offered weakly, his eyes darting to the other customers who had stopped their browsing to watch the exchange. "Might take a few months, though, coming all the way from back east." "That will be fine, Mr. Henderson," Ophelia replied, keeping her voice steady despite the familiar sting of embarrassment. She paid for the fabric and thread she had selected, intending to alter her existing dresses once again and turn to leave. As she did, she heard the whispers start, just loud enough for her to catch fragments. "Unnatural height for a woman. Poor thing will never find a husband. What man would want to look up at his wife?" Ophelia pushed through the door, the August sun hitting her face as she stepped onto the wooden boardwalk. She had long ago accepted that marriage was not in her future. At 23 years old, she had watched her younger sisters back in Ohio marry one by one, their average heights making them desirable matches. Her own height had become apparent early, and by the time she was 15, she had surpassed her father. The young men who had once shown interest quickly found reasons to court other girls. The boarding house was a 20-minute walk from the town center, and Ophelia welcomed the exercise. The Montana landscape was breathtaking, with rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, their peaks still touched with snow even in summer. The air smelled of pine and sage, so different from the humid Ohio summers she had known. As she walked, she heard hoofbeats approaching from behind. She moved to the side of the dirt road, expecting the rider to pass, but instead the horse slowed to match her pace. "Afternoon, miss," a deep voice called out. Ophelia glanced up and found herself looking at a man on horseback who, even mounted, seemed tall. He had removed his hat in greeting, revealing dark hair and eyes the color of strong coffee. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. "Good afternoon," she replied cautiously, continuing to walk. "Name's Zachary Porter," he said, still keeping pace with her. "I run a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Just came from the bank and couldn't help but notice you seem to be headed in the direction of the old Brennan place." "My aunt inherited it," Ophelia confirmed. "We have turned it into a boarding house." Zachary nodded, and she noticed he was studying her face, not her height. It was unusual enough that she found herself meeting his gaze more directly. "I heard Martha Redmond had arrived with her niece. Town talks, especially when new folks arrive." He smiled, and those lines around his eyes deepened. "I was actually hoping to speak with your aunt about boarding some of my ranch hands during the winter months. The bunkhouse needs repairs, and I would rather have the men comfortable in town than trying to patch it up before the snow comes." "I am sure my aunt would welcome the business," Ophelia said. "She is at the house now if you would like to discuss it with her." "I would appreciate that." Zachary dismounted in one smooth motion, and Ophelia's breath caught slightly. Standing on the ground, he was tall, very tall. She estimated he was at least 6 feet and 5 inches, perhaps more. For the first time in her life, she had to tilt her head back slightly to look someone in the eye. Zachary noticed her reaction and grinned. "Not often I meet someone who does not have to crane their neck to talk to me," he said easily. "It is a pleasant change." They walked together, Zachary leading his horse, a beautiful bay mare with a white star on her forehead. The conversation flowed surprisingly naturally. Zachary had inherited his ranch from his father 3 years prior, after both his parents had succumbed to influenza during a particularly harsh winter. He ran cattle and horses, employing 5 full-time ranch hands and additional help during busy seasons. "It is hard work," he admitted, "but it is mine. My father came out here in '65, right after the war, wanting to start fresh. He built everything from nothing, and I aim to honor that by making it thrive." "That must be a great responsibility," Ophelia said, genuinely interested. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" Zachary laughed, a warm sound that seemed to rumble from deep in his chest. "Not exactly. When I was young, I wanted to be a school teacher, if you can believe it. Loved reading, still do when I have the time, but ranching is in my blood, I suppose. There is something about this land that gets into you." They reached the boarding house, a 2-story structure that had seen better days but was slowly being restored through Martha's efforts and Ophelia's help. Martha herself was on the front porch, beating dust from a rug with more vigor than her 70 years should have allowed. "Aunt Martha," Ophelia called out, "this is Mr. Zachary Porter. He owns a ranch north of town and would like to discuss boarding some of his men this winter." Martha straightened, pushing a strand of gray hair from her face. Her eyes were sharp as they took in the tall cowboy, then flickered to her niece with an expression Ophelia could not quite read. "Mr. Porter, welcome. Come inside and we can talk business." "Ophelia, dear, would you make some coffee?" The kitchen was Ophelia's domain. She had always been a capable cook, and in the 2 weeks since their arrival, she had managed to turn the dusty, neglected space into something warm and functional. As she prepared the coffee and sliced some of the bread she had baked that morning, she could hear the murmur of voices from the front room where Martha and Zachary discussed terms. When she brought the tray in, she found them shaking hands, both looking pleased. "Mr. Porter will be sending his 5 men starting in October," Martha announced. "He has also agreed to help us repair the barn roof before then, as he will need the space to stable the men's horses." "I will bring my crew next week to start on that," Zachary said, accepting the coffee cup from Ophelia. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her hand. "This is excellent coffee, Miss Redmond. Thank you. I learned from my mother. She always said good coffee could solve half the world's problems." "A wise woman," Zachary agreed. He stayed for another half-hour discussing details with Martha, but Ophelia noticed his eyes often drifted to her. Unlike the stares she was accustomed to, his gaze held no judgment or curiosity about her height, only what seemed like genuine interest. After he left, Martha turned to her niece with a knowing smile. "That is a good man, Ophelia. His father was honest and fair, and from what I hear, the son is the same. Treats his workers well, pays them fairly." "That is good to know," Ophelia said carefully, unsure where her aunt was heading with this observation. "He could not take his eyes off you," Martha continued, her smile widening. "Aunt Martha, please do not start imagining things. He was simply being polite. I am old, dear girl, not blind. That young man looked at you the way your uncle looked at me 50 years ago, God rest his soul." Ophelia shook her head, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. She had learned long ago not to let hope take root. Hope only led to disappointment. The following week, Zachary arrived with his ranch hands just after dawn. Ophelia was in the garden, tending to the vegetables she and Martha had planted, when she heard the sound of wagons and horses. She stood, brushing dirt from her skirt, and watched as 6 men dismounted in the yard. Zachary spotted her immediately and raised a hand in greeting. "Morning, Miss Redmond. We came prepared to work. Where would you like us to start?" The day passed in a flurry of activity. The ranch hands were a diverse group, ranging from a young man barely 18 to a grizzled veteran in his 50s. They worked efficiently, tearing off the damaged portions of the barn roof and replacing them with new timber Zachary had brought. Ophelia and Martha kept the workers supplied with water, coffee, and a substantial midday meal. During the meal break, Zachary sat on the porch steps, and Ophelia found herself joining him, bringing 2 glasses of cold lemonade. "Your aunt mentioned you helped design the new layout for the boarding house," Zachary said, accepting the glass gratefully. "She said you have a good head for practical matters." "I enjoy problem solving," Ophelia admitted. "Back in Ohio, I helped my father with his bookkeeping. He owned a dry goods store. I found I had a talent for organizing things efficiently. That is a valuable skill out here. Too many folks start ventures without thinking through the practical aspects." He took a long drink of the lemonade. "This is delicious." "Is there anything you cannot do well, Miss Redmond?" Ophelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I am terrible at needlework. My stitches are always uneven, and my embroidery looks like a chicken walked across the fabric." Zachary laughed, that same warm sound she had heard before. "Well, I cannot say I have ever needed embroidery on a ranch, so I think you are safe there." "What about you, Mr. Porter? What are you terrible at?" He considered this seriously. "Singing. I am absolutely terrible at it. My mother used to say I could not carry a tune in a bucket. But I still sing to the cattle sometimes. They do not seem to mind." The image of this large, capable man singing off-key to cattle made Ophelia smile, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. She realized it had been a long time since she had felt this comfortable talking to someone new. Over the next 3 days, the barn roof was completed, and the structure was reinforced and weatherproofed for the coming winter. Zachary proved to be as hardworking as his men, never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. Ophelia observed how they respected him, how they worked harder in his presence not out of fear but out of genuine desire to please a good employer. On the final day, as the men were loading their tools back into the wagons, Zachary approached Ophelia. She was sweeping the porch, and he waited until she paused before speaking. "Miss Redmond, there is a dance in town this Saturday evening. It is a regular monthly gathering, nothing fancy, but the whole town usually turns out. I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you." Ophelia's heart sank. She set the broom aside carefully. "Mr. Porter, that is very kind of you, but I do not dance. You do not know how, or you do not enjoy it." "I do not attend dances," she clarified, trying to keep her voice steady. "I learned long ago that it is better to avoid certain situations." Zachary was quiet for a moment. "May I speak plainly, Miss Redmond?" She nodded, steeling herself for whatever polite rejection was coming. "I am 31 years old. I have spent my entire life being the tallest person in almost any room I enter. I have had women refuse to dance with me because they felt ridiculous standing next to me. I have had men pick fights to prove they were not intimidated by my size. I have been called a freak, a giant, and various other creative names." He paused, his brown eyes serious. "So I think I understand, at least somewhat, what you might have experienced." Ophelia felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Then you understand why I cannot go to the dance." "Actually, I think that is precisely why you should go." He took a step closer, and she caught the scent of wood shavings and leather. "You are tall, Miss Redmond. Beautifully, wonderfully tall. When I first saw you, do you know what I thought?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "I thought, finally, a woman I can look in the eye without bending down. I thought, finally, a woman I could dance with without feeling like I was going to step on her. I thought, finally, someone who might understand what it is like to be different." His voice softened. "I do not want to escort you to that dance out of pity or politeness. I want to escort you because when I am around you, I feel like I have found something I did not even know I was looking for." The tears did fall then, just a few which she quickly brushed away. "Mr. Porter." "Zachary, please." "Zachary," she corrected, tasting his name on her tongue. "People will talk. They already talk about me. Let them talk. They have been talking about me my whole life. I stopped listening years ago." He smiled gently. "But if you truly do not want to go, I will understand. I will not press you. I just hoped that maybe you were tired of hiding." Ophelia took a deep breath. She was tired of hiding, tired of making herself small in a world that would never see her that way anyway. And here was this man, this impossibly tall, kind, handsome man, asking her to step into the light with him. "I would be honored to attend the dance with you, Zachary." His face lit up with a smile that made her heart race. "Saturday at 7 then. I will call for you." After he and his men left, Martha found Ophelia still standing on the porch, staring down the road where the dust from the wagons was slowly settling. "You said yes, did you not?" Martha asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "I did." "Good. That took you long enough. Now, we need to do something about a dress for you." The days leading up to Saturday were a whirlwind of activity. Martha, it turned out, had been an accomplished seamstress in her youth, and together she and Ophelia modified one of Ophelia's better dresses. They let down the hem as far as it would go and added a coordinating panel of fabric to extend the length. The bodice was altered to better fit Ophelia's tall frame, and Martha added some delicate lace at the collar that had belonged to her own mother. "You are going to be the most beautiful woman at that dance," Martha declared as Ophelia tried on the finished product Friday evening. Ophelia studied herself in the small mirror. The dress was a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes. For once, the length was appropriate, falling to her ankles instead of stopping awkwardly mid-calf. The fit was better than anything she had worn in years. "I am terrified," she admitted to her aunt. "Of course you are, but you are also brave. You would not have come all the way to Montana if you were not." Martha adjusted a small detail on the sleeve. "And you will have Zachary by your side. That young man will not let anyone trouble you." Saturday arrived too quickly and not fast enough. Ophelia spent the day helping Martha with the regular boarding house duties, trying to keep her mind occupied. They had 3 permanent boarders, all miners who worked in the small operations dotting the hills around Custer. The men were quiet and respectful, keeping to themselves mostly, but they seemed to appreciate the clean rooms and good food Martha and Ophelia provided. At 6 o'clock, Ophelia began getting ready. She washed carefully, using some of the lavender-scented soap Martha had given her. She brushed her dark blonde hair until it shone, then arranged it in a simple but elegant style that Martha helped pin in place. The dress slipped on smoothly, and Martha fastened the long row of buttons down the back. "You look lovely," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Ophelia's mother had passed away 2 years earlier, a loss that still ached. Her father had remarried within a year to a woman who made it clear that Ophelia's presence in the household was no longer desired. When Martha's letter had arrived, inviting Ophelia to help run the boarding house, it had felt like a lifeline. At precisely 7 o'clock, they heard a knock at the door. Martha answered it, and Ophelia heard Zachary's voice, polite and warm as he greeted her aunt. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked into the front room. Zachary stood near the door, hat in his hands, wearing a clean white shirt, black vest, and dark trousers. His boots were polished and his hair was neatly combed. When he saw Ophelia, his eyes widened and a slow smile spread across his face. "Miss Redmond, you look absolutely beautiful. Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." Martha beamed at both of them. "You two have a wonderful time. Ophelia, do not worry about when you return. Just enjoy yourself." Zachary helped Ophelia into his wagon, a smaller, lighter one than the work wagon he had brought earlier in the week. This one had a proper seat with a cushion, and the bed was clean and empty. As they drove toward town, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Are you nervous?" Zachary asked as they traveled. "Terrified," Ophelia admitted. "I have not been to a dance in over 5 years." "Neither have I," he confessed. "I usually avoid them. But I wanted an excuse to spend an evening with you, and a dance seemed like a good option." His honesty was disarming. "What if we are both terrible at it? Then we will be terrible together, and that will make for a good story someday." The dance was held in the largest building in town, a structure that served as a meeting hall, church, and gathering space depending on the day's needs. As Zachary helped Ophelia down from the wagon, she could already hear music drifting through the open windows and see people milling about inside. Several heads turned as they entered together, and Ophelia felt the familiar weight of stares. But Zachary kept his hand gently at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd with quiet confidence. He nodded to people he knew, introduced Ophelia to several townspeople with impeccable politeness, and seemed completely unconcerned with the whispers. The band, consisting of a fiddle, a guitar, and someone on a makeshift drum, struck up a lively tune. Couples moved onto the dance floor, and Zachary turned to Ophelia. "May I have this dance?" She placed her hand in his, and he led her to the floor. For the first time in her life, Ophelia danced with someone whose shoulder she did not tower over. Zachary was tall enough that she fit perfectly in his arms, their heights matching in a way that made the movements natural and easy. He was not the most skilled dancer, and she was rusty, but somehow it worked. They moved together, finding a rhythm that was theirs alone. "You are smiling," Zachary observed, his own face lit with pleasure. "I am happy," Ophelia realized. "I do not remember the last time I was this happy." They danced 3 more dances before taking a break for refreshments. Ophelia noticed the stares had not stopped, but their nature seemed to have shifted. Instead of judgment, she saw curiosity and, in some faces, something that might have been approval. Several women approached to introduce themselves properly, and Ophelia found herself in pleasant conversations about the boarding house, the town, and life in Montana Territory. "See," Zachary said quietly when they had a moment alone, "not so terrible." "No," she agreed, "not terrible at all." As the evening progressed, Ophelia felt layers of self-consciousness falling away. When Zachary held her hand, she did not pull away. When he looked at her with those warm brown eyes, she allowed herself to look back. When he brought her a cup of punch and stood close enough that their arms brushed, she did not step away. During a slower dance, as the fiddle played a gentle waltz, Zachary spoke softly near her ear. "I need to confess something, Ophelia. May I call you Ophelia?" "Yes," she breathed, very aware of his hand on her waist, the other holding hers gently. "When I heard Martha Redmond was arriving with her niece, I made inquiries. It is a small town and people talk. I heard about you before we ever met." Ophelia stiffened slightly. "What did you hear?" "I heard that you were unusually tall, that you were unmarried and likely to remain so, that you were coming to help your aunt because you had nowhere else to go." He paused. "I also heard that you were kind, intelligent, and capable, that you had cared for your mother through her final illness, that you had helped your younger sisters prepare for their weddings even though it must have pained you. How did you hear all that? Martha is proud of you. She talks about you to anyone who will listen. He guided them through a gentle turn. But here is my confession. When I heard about you, about your height, I was intrigued. I thought, maybe here is someone who might understand. Maybe here is someone who has felt the same isolation I have felt. So when I saw you leaving the general store that day, it was not a coincidence that I rode past. I was looking for you. Ophelia pulled back slightly to look at his face, searching for any sign of deception. She found only honesty and vulnerability. Why are you telling me this? Because I do not want there to be any pretense between us. I am interested in you, Ophelia. Not because you are tall, though I will admit that makes things easier. I am interested in you because of who you are. The way you speak, the way you think, the way you smile when you forget to be self-conscious. I wanted you to know that my interest is genuine and that it started the moment I learned of your existence. The music swelled around them, and Ophelia felt something break open in her chest, something that had been closed and protected for so long. I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything tonight. I just wanted you to know where I stand. He smiled softly. Though if you wanted to say something, I would certainly listen. I am interested in you too, Ophelia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You terrify me, Zachary Porter, because you make me hope, and hope has only ever led to disappointment in my life. Then let me prove that this time can be different, he said. Let me show you that hope is not always followed by disappointment. The dance ended too soon. As Zachary drove her back to the boarding house under a sky full of stars, Ophelia felt as though she were in a dream. They talked easily about everything and nothing. He told her about his ranch, about his dreams of expanding the herd and maybe breeding horses. She told him about her love of reading, about the small library she was building in the boarding house, about her dream of maybe teaching someday. At the door of the boarding house, Zachary took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. May I call on you tomorrow? Perhaps we could take a ride. I would love to show you the ranch. I would like that very much. Until tomorrow then, Ophelia. She watched him drive away before going inside, where Martha was waiting with barely concealed excitement. Well, how was it? Ophelia sank into a chair, her hand still tingling where Zachary had kissed it. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. The next morning, after finishing her chores, Ophelia dressed in her riding outfit, a practical split skirt and simple blouse that allowed for horseback riding. Zachary arrived at noon with 2 horses, his bay mare and a gentle gray gelding. This is Sterling, he introduced the gray horse. He is calm and steady, perfect for a ride through the countryside. The ride to Zachary's ranch took them through some of the most beautiful landscape Ophelia had ever seen. They followed a creek that wound through meadows dotted with wildflowers, then climbed into hills covered with pine trees. Zachary pointed out landmarks, told stories about the land, and shared his vision for the future. The ranch itself was impressive. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a wide porch and large windows. The barn was substantial, and there were several other outbuildings in various states of repair. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and Ophelia could see a few horses in a corral near the barn. My father built most of this himself, Zachary said with obvious pride. I have added to it and made improvements, but the foundation is all his work. He showed her around, introducing her to the ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse, men she recognized from the barn roof repair. They were respectful and friendly, and Ophelia could see the easy camaraderie between Zachary and his workers. In the main house, Zachary had maintained a surprising level of cleanliness and order for a bachelor. The front room had comfortable furniture and a large stone fireplace. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with an eclectic collection of volumes. "May I?" Ophelia asked, gesturing to the books. "Please. I told you I love to read. People are always surprised by that." She scanned the titles, finding everything from agricultural manuals to poetry collections, from adventure novels to philosophical treatises. "This is an impressive library." Books were precious to my mother. She was educated back east before she married my father. She made sure I learned to value learning, even if my life was going to be spent on a ranch. They spent the afternoon talking, sharing stories about their childhoods, their families, their hopes and fears. Zachary prepared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold beef, which they ate on the porch while watching the sun begin its descent toward the mountains. "I need to get you back before dark," Zachary said reluctantly. "But I have to tell you, this has been one of the best days I have had in a very long time." "For me as well," Ophelia agreed. As they rode back, Zachary reached over and took her hand. They rode the rest of the way like that, hands linked between their horses, neither wanting to break the connection. Over the following weeks, Zachary became a regular presence at the boarding house. He would arrive in the late afternoon after his ranch work was done and help with whatever needed doing. He repaired loose boards on the porch, fixed a stubborn door that never quite closed properly, and helped Ophelia plant a late summer garden. But mostly they talked and spent time together, learning each other's rhythms and habits. The town noticed, of course. How could they not? But the whispers changed from skeptical to speculative to, eventually, accepting. It was hard to criticize a couple who so obviously fit together, who looked at each other with such transparent affection. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Zachary turned to Ophelia with an expression she had learned meant he had something important to say. "I have been thinking," he began. "That sounds dangerous," she teased, but her heart was racing. "I am not good at pretty words or fancy speeches. I am just a rancher who spends most of his time with cattle and horses. But I know what I feel and I know what I want." He took her hand. "I want you, Ophelia. I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to talk to you about everything and nothing. I want to dance with you in our kitchen and read books together by the fire. I want to build a life with you." Ophelia felt tears gathering but did not try to stop them. "Zachary, I am not asking yet," he continued quickly. "I know we have only known each other a short time, but I am telling you my intentions, Ophelia. I intend to court you properly. I intend to show you every day that you are valued and cherished. And when enough time has passed that you trust this is real, I intend to ask you to be my wife." "You do not have to wait," Ophelia said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I already know this is real. I have never felt anything more real in my life." "Are you saying?" "I am saying that if you were to ask me right now, my answer would be yes. 1,000 times yes." Zachary stood, pulling her up with him. For a moment they just looked at each other, and then he was kissing her. It was gentle at first, tentative, asking permission. But when Ophelia responded, her arms coming up around his neck, the kiss deepened into something that spoke of promises and passion and a future together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "I do not have a ring yet. I do not need a ring right now. I just need you." But Zachary, being Zachary, wanted to do things properly. The next day he rode into Custer and visited the jeweler, a man named Samuel who occasionally did work in gold and silver when he was not assaying ore for the mining operations. Zachary described what he wanted, and Samuel promised to have it ready within 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks passed in a blur of happiness and planning. Ophelia and Zachary discussed their future openly now. She would move to the ranch after they married. Martha would continue running the boarding house, and Ophelia would help when needed, but her primary home would be with Zachary. They talked about children, about building onto the house, about the life they would create together. The ring, when it was ready, was perfect. A simple gold band with a small sapphire set in it, the stone the color of Montana's big sky. Zachary proposed officially on the porch of the boarding house, going down on one knee despite the fact that they had already decided to marry. Ophelia Redmond, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are intelligent, kind, strong, and beautiful. You make me want to be a better man. Would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? Yes, she said, pulling him up and into her arms. Yes, absolutely yes. They decided on a November wedding, giving them time to prepare, but not so long that they had to endure a Montana winter before officially starting their lives together. Martha threw herself into preparations with enthusiasm, and several of the townswomen who had warmed to Ophelia over the past months offered their help. The wedding was held in the same hall where they had danced that first night. The whole town turned out, curious to see the union of the two tallest people in Custer. Ophelia wore a dress that Martha had labored over for weeks, cream-colored with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was adorned with small wildflowers that had been preserved for the occasion. When Zachary saw her walking toward him down the makeshift aisle, his eyes filled with tears. And when the minister asked if he took this woman to be his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong, leaving no doubt about his commitment. The celebration afterward was joyful and genuine. People who had once whispered about Ophelia now congratulated her warmly. The band played, and Zachary and Ophelia danced their first dance as husband and wife to enthusiastic applause. As the evening wound down, they said goodbye to Martha, who hugged them both fiercely, and began the journey to the ranch, to their home. That first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet. Zachary had prepared the bedroom with care, and he treated Ophelia with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. They learned each other slowly, discovering the ways their bodies fit together as perfectly as the rest of them seemed to. Life on the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Ophelia adapted to her new role with the same capability she brought to everything. She took over managing the household, cooking for Zachary and the ranch hands, keeping the accounts, and generally organizing things with an efficiency that impressed everyone. The men quickly learned that Mrs. Porter was not just the boss's wife, but a force to be reckoned with in her own right. She also discovered a love for ranch life that surprised her. She learned to ride well, often accompanying Zachary when he checked on the cattle. She helped with branding in the spring and with the harvest of hay in the summer. She was not afraid of hard work, and the physical labor felt satisfying in a way her previous life never had. The first winter was harsh, testing them in ways they had not anticipated. Snow came early and stayed late, and there were days when they could not see beyond the porch for the blowing white. But they weathered it together, spending long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, making plans for the spring, and growing ever closer. In the spring, Ophelia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Zachary became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy lifting or strenuous work. Ophelia tolerated this for about a week, before sitting him down for a firm conversation about how she was pregnant, not broken. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still managing their daily lives, she told him firmly. I will not lift anything dangerously heavy, and I will rest when I need to, but I am not going to spend the next 6 months sitting in a chair doing nothing. I just want you safe. Want both of you safe, Zachary said, his hand moving to her still flat stomach. We will be safe. But you have to trust me to know my own body and limits. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Ophelia continued her work around the ranch, modifying her activities as her body changed. Martha visited frequently, bringing supplies and advice, sharing stories of the babies she had helped bring into the world over her long life. As summer turned to fall, Ophelia's belly grew round and heavy. Zachary had built a beautiful cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there was not a single rough edge. They prepared the room next to theirs as a nursery, painting it a cheerful yellow. In October, on a crisp autumn morning, Ophelia's labor began. Martha was sent for, and she arrived with the doctor, a steady man named Robert Chen who had been practicing in Custer for a decade. The labor was long and difficult, as first labors often are, but Ophelia was strong, and Martha and Dr. Chen were experienced. Zachary paced outside the bedroom, driven nearly mad with worry by the sounds of pain he could hear. Finally, after nearly 15 hours, he heard a new sound. The wail of a baby. Martha emerged, tears streaming down her face, smiling broadly. You have a son, Zachary, a big, healthy boy. And Ophelia is tired but doing well. He rushed into the room and found Ophelia propped up on pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a small bundle, and when she pulled back the blanket, Zachary saw his son for the first time. The baby was indeed large, with a shock of dark hair and a red, wrinkled face. His eyes, when he opened them briefly, were dark like Zachary's. He is perfect, Zachary breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. You are perfect. I cannot believe this is real. What should we name him? Ophelia asked, though they had discussed this many times over the past months. I was thinking about my father. His name was Thomas Porter. Thomas Porter, Ophelia repeated, smiling down at the baby. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one. The first year of Thomas's life was exhausting and wonderful. He was a good baby overall, healthy and growing fast. By his first birthday, it was clear he had inherited his parents' height, already bigger than other children his age. Ophelia managed motherhood and ranch life with her characteristic efficiency. Though she would be the first to admit there were days she wanted to cry from exhaustion. But Zachary was a devoted father and partner, taking his turn walking the floor with a fussy baby, changing nappies without complaint, and giving Ophelia breaks when she needed them. When Thomas was 2, they welcomed a daughter they named Caroline, a delicate baby with blonde hair like Ophelia's and her father's brown eyes. 2 years after that came another son, James, who was the spitting image of his older brother. The house, which Zachary had expanded with a proper second story, rang with the sounds of children. It was chaos often, with toys underfoot and the constant noise of young ones playing and sometimes fighting. But it was also filled with love and laughter. Martha remained a constant presence in their lives until she passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, when Thomas was 8, Caroline was 6, and James was 4. Her death hit Ophelia hard, but she took comfort in knowing Martha had lived to see her happy, had known her great nieces and nephew, had witnessed the love story she had predicted from the very beginning. The boarding house was sold to a young couple looking to start fresh in Montana, and the proceeds were split between Ophelia and her sisters back in Ohio. Ophelia used her share to build a small library in Custer, a memorial to Martha who had always valued education and reading. It was a simple building, but it was filled with books, and Ophelia spent one afternoon a week there, helping people find stories and information, teaching children to read. As the years passed, the ranch prospered. Zachary's reputation for quality cattle and horses spread, and they were able to expand their operations significantly. They hired more hands, built better facilities, and became one of the most successful ranches in the region. Their children grew tall, all of them, inheriting the height of their parents. Thomas reached 6 feet and 4 inches by the time he was 18, taller than his father. Caroline, at 6 feet and 1 inch, had her mother's grace and intelligence. James settled at 6 feet and 5 inches, the tallest of them all. Unlike their parents, the children never felt strange about their height. They grew up in a house where being tall was normal, where their parents fit together perfectly, where height was just another characteristic like hair color or eye color. They carried themselves with a confidence that Ophelia sometimes envied, though she was grateful they would never know the isolation she had experienced. Thomas became a veterinarian, studying back east before returning to Montana to practice. He married a schoolteacher named Alice who was 5 feet and 10 inches tall, and they had 4 children. Caroline became a teacher herself, eventually running the school in Custer. She married a blacksmith who was 6 feet and 2 inches tall, and they had 3 children. James took over the ranch when Zachary began to slow down, proving to be as capable and fair as his father. He married a rancher's daughter who stood 6 feet tall, and they had 5 children between them. Ophelia and Zachary grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated their 25th anniversary with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch, a raucous, joyful affair that lasted 3 days. Their 50th anniversary was quieter, just the 2 of them and their immediate family, but no less meaningful. On their 60th anniversary, Zachary's health was failing. Years of hard ranch work had taken their toll on his body, and he spent most of his days in a chair on the porch, watching the land he loved. Ophelia, still strong at 83, sat with him every day, holding his hand, reading to him, reminiscing about their life together. "You remember the first time I saw you?" Zachary asked one autumn afternoon, his voice thin but clear. "You were walking down the road, your head held high despite whatever had happened in the store. You were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. You told me I was perfect for you," Ophelia remembered, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "No one had ever said anything like that to me before. It was true then, and it is true now. You were perfect for me, Ophelia. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You taught me what it was to be loved completely, without reservation or condition. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." Zachary passed quietly in his sleep 2 days later, with Ophelia holding his hand. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Montana, people whose lives had been touched by his kindness, his fairness, his quiet strength. Ophelia lived another 5 years, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, tending to her library, and writing down the story of her life with Zachary so that future generations would know the love they had shared. She wrote about being too tall, about feeling like she would never belong anywhere, about the cowboy who had looked at her and said she was perfect for him. On a spring morning, surrounded by her family, Ophelia closed her eyes for the last time. Her last words were, "I am coming, Zachary. Wait for me." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple headstones that read Zachary Porter, beloved husband, father, and friend, and Ophelia Porter, beloved wife, mother, and friend. Between them, their children placed a third stone, smaller, with just one line. 2 souls who found their perfect match. Years later, when the ranch had passed to the 4th generation of Porters, when Custer had grown from a small mining town to a thriving community. The story of Zachary and Ophelia became something of a local legend. It was told to young people who felt different, who felt like they did not fit in, who wondered if they would ever find someone who understood them. The story reminded them that there was someone for everyone, that being different was not a curse, but simply a characteristic, and that true love had nothing to do with meeting someone else's standards, and everything to do with finding the person who saw you exactly as you were and loved you not despite it, but because of it. The library Ophelia had founded still stood, expanded now into a proper building with 2 floors and thousands of books. In the front hall hung a portrait, painted from an old photograph, of a tall woman and an even taller man, standing together, looking at each other with expressions of such love and devotion that visitors often stopped to read the plaque beneath it. Ophelia and Zachary Porter. She was too tall for any man in town. He said, "Then you are perfect for me." Their love story reminds us that being different is not a barrier to love, but sometimes the very thing that leads us to it. The ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation. Built on the foundation Zachary had laid and sustained by the organizational skills and intelligence Ophelia had brought to it. The Porter family became known for their height, yes, but more importantly for their integrity, their fairness, and their commitment to community. Thomas's great-great-grandson, another Zachary, stood on the porch of the ranch house one evening, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant colors. He was newly married to a woman who stood 6 feet and 2 inches tall, a woman who had spent her life feeling too big, too awkward, too different. He had told her the story of their ancestors, and she had cried, saying she finally understood that her height was not a flaw. Young Zachary looked out at the land his family had worked for over a century and thought about the 2 people who had started it all. He had never met them, of course, but their presence felt real to him, woven into the very fabric of the ranch and the family. Their love story had shaped generations, had given countless people hope, had proved that being different was just another way of being perfect. Inside the house, his wife called his name and he turned to go to her, grateful for the legacy he had inherited, grateful for the lesson his ancestors had taught. That love sees not with eyes but with the heart, and that somewhere in this world there is someone who will look at you and see not your differences, but your perfection. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the world in gold and shadow, and in the gathering darkness, if you listened carefully, you might have heard the echo of music from a long-ago dance, the sound of laughter, and 2 voices promising to love each other through all the days of their lives. A promise kept faithfully until the very end.